Boa tarde a todos, novamente. Bem-vindos a mais um painel de conferência. Este é sobre o encerramento de multinacionais, o capital que fica. Este painel é mais internacional, portanto vamos conduzi-lo em inglês. I'll start immediately by introducing our main speaker, our first speaker, Dr. Pedro de Faria, who coordinated the summary of the study, the closure of multinationals, the capital that stays. Dr. de Faria is an associate professor at the Faculty of Economics at the University of Groningen. His fields of study and expertise areas include innovation management, strategic alliances, and knowledge protection strategies. Please. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for sharing the session. So I would like to start by thanking the foundation, the Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos, for organizing this event and mainly for giving the opportunity to develop this study. I would also like to thank our team members. So it's myself, so Pedro de Faria from the University of Groningen, and then my colleague, so Wolfgang Sofka, that is also part of the panel from Copenhagen's Business School, Miguel Torres Preto and António Ribeiro from Universidade de Lisboa, and Andrea Distel also from Copenhagen's Business School. As you already know from the program and from the publication that you have, our topic is the closure of multinationals. And our focus is on what causes this and what are the consequences in the medium run for the country. And so we had two starting points for our presentation, for our project. So the first one is, what is illustrated by these two pictures. So these are two companies that closed their subsidiaries in Portugal, so Quimonda and Roda. And both of them are subsidiaries from German multinational companies that had a lot of employees in Portugal, and at a certain moment they closed down. And this had a lot of impact on media in Portugal, because there was a lot of unemployment, there was a lot of discussion about the support that these multinational companies got to come to Portugal and the way they left without leaving a lot. So leaving just a trail of unemployment and of social unrest. Our observation is that these events are not that rare and they have a lot of consequences and they are very visible. So this is one of our starting points. So this led us to look at the numbers. So we have this pieces of information, there might be over visible. So we looked at what is really happening. So is this an event that happens often in the Portuguese economy? And the answer is yes. So despite the fact that we only have around 1% of companies in Portugal that are foreign multinational subsidiaries, these subsidiaries are responsible for a much larger amount of employment. So in the 1980s, it was around 9% of employees were working for foreign multinationals, subsidiaries, and around 2015-16 is around 15%. So this is foreign multinationals have a big role in the Portuguese economy. So this is the overall picture. Then we looked more specifically at the subsidiaries leaving Portugal. And this is quite surprising. So we have 200 per year on average. Of course, we have the crisis and there are peaks and low. So there are years with lower numbers and higher numbers. But on average, we have 200 foreign multinational subsidiaries that leave Portugal. This means, if we think a little bit, it's almost one, so it's more than one every 2 days. And of course, they are larger and smaller, but it's not a rare event. And also associated with this, we can look at the number of displaced employees, so individuals that lose their job because of this displacement. And this is around 6,300 people per year. So it's a considerable number. And what we realized, so we have this picture from the media perception and these numbers, and our question was trying to understand the reasons and the consequences of this. And so this is the objective of our starting point was understanding causes and consequences of the closure of foreign multinational subsidiaries. And we decided to look this in different steps and looking at different research questions, so different problems that are associated, so different open questions that are associated with this specific objective. So our first project was even, that we concluded before this overall project with the foundation, was trying to understand how does it affect employees' careers. So we looked specifically at the salaries of people that lost their jobs while working for a multinational, and we compared with the salaries of employees that lost their jobs in domestic firms that closed down also, and we tried to see what kind of effect both these events had. And we concluded that people working for multinational companies are punished less for this unemployment event. So this was the project that even served as motivation, our internal motivation to start this project with the Fundação. Then we developed 3 projects within this broader project that we are discussing today. So the first one was trying to understand which conditions minimize this occurrence. So trying to understand what can multinationals do, so which multinationals have characteristics that will decrease the probability that they will close down their activities in Portugal. Our second sub-project was it's trying to understand the consequences of this. So of course we know the immediate consequence, and that's unemployment. We try to look at something more in the medium run. And our question is, are local firms benefiting from it? So that was our broad question for our second project. And then we have a third project that also is related with the second one, and is trying also to look at how can these multinational companies build their activities and become more productive, and what kind of employees they should hire to be more embedded in the Portuguese economy. And the research question that we ask here, the broad research question, is how entrepreneurs help foreign multinational subsidiaries. So these are the 3 projects that I will describe today, and I hope that all of them will raise, interesting points for our discussion. So just to go through the empirical data, so I will not go into much detail because this could get a little bit boring, I would say, but just to let you know that this is an empirical study. We used the same database as the previous project, so the Quadros Pessoal, that's the matched employee data set that is developed by the Portuguese Ministry of Labour and Social Security. And this gave us the opportunity to measure, so I have here the list of dependent variables. So it gives us information about the firms, but also very importantly, we have information about the employees. So we can follow them and we can follow their careers. And this is very important for our projects. So, as I said, so we had 3 sub-projects. This is the first one. And what's the main idea? So these pictures, again, illustrate the problem that you are looking at. So we have 2 situations here. So we have this picture, where you see some smiles and people very happy. So this is the team starting a company, right? So starting, in this case, let's imagine that is a foreign multinational in Portugal. And this is the team that is setting everything. So they are the ones that will start the business. And then here we have situations, so the closure. And this is the effect that I discussed before. So you see people getting unemployed, people getting angry, and this has a lot of impact on society. So these are not examples in Portugal, but this is the picture that we have in the end. And the objective of our study was to try to look at what can these people that are there in the beginning can do to avoid this from happening. So what is the characteristics of these individuals that could constitute a team that would avoid the closure? So that's our broad idea. So, and we embedded this in theory. So we also looked at what existing literature was telling us. And so we looked at literature looking at so foreign direct investment and what are the conditions, how multinational companies start as subsidiaries in other countries. And this literature looks normally at the kind of structure, so kind of capital structure that the companies have. So they look at if the companies are starting fully owned subsidiaries or if they are starting with joint ventures. And normally that's the perspective that this international business literature has. What we realized is that there was something missing, and that something missing was looking at those individuals that I showed there. So if there is diversity regarding the teams, and what are the characteristics that are associated with success of multinational subsidiaries. And we look at the choices that these multinational companies make when they open the subsidiaries, and in particular in Portugal. So our focus is to explain how human capital decisions made at entry affect the survival of multinational subsidiaries. And in particular, our research question is how can the imprinting effects of strategic human capital at the time of entry affect the closure risk of multinational subsidiaries. And the important thing here is this imprinting effects, because what we claim, and that's also discussed in the literature, and mainly in the literature on entrepreneurship, that it's very important. So the team that starts a new business or a new venture, they really define the culture of a company. And what we claim is that these choices that the multinational makes when opening the subsidiary in Portugal will define the nature of the subsidiary that they want and the activities that they want to develop, and this will have long-lasting effects. And ignoring this dimension would give us, well, probably a wrong picture of what's happening in the multinational subsidiaries in Portugal. So we have, to answer this question, so we developed some hypotheses. So we looked at the odds of survival of subsidiary, and we look at three particular dimensions related with human capital. So we looked at multinational experience of employees. We looked at expats in management, and expats, I will define it, so it's employees that come from the headquarters to work in the subsidiary. So they come, and the idea, normally they are involved in trying to make the link between headquarters and the local economy. And we also look at the pay per performance remuneration. So, and we have logic for all of this. So the first one, so what we claim is that employees that worked before in other multinationals, they will develop certain skills and certain routines that will be very helpful for the new subsidiary, because they will be it will be easier for them to adapt to this culture associated with the multinational. So multinationals have things in common, and these employees have this experience working for other multinational, and then they can apply it in this new subsidiary. The expats in management, what we claim, so as I said before, they will make this link between the local economy and the headquarters, and that will increase the survival odds of the subsidiary. And the pay per performance, so it's a different dimension. So what we see is that subsidiaries that pay, that have their payment structure is also related with performance. So they give incentives to employees to work in a specific way, and they also attract more risk-taking individuals, because these people that are more willing to take the risk of having parts of the salary that are not fixed will have different characteristics. So we find support for the three hypotheses, and so what we do, so we give more or less a picture of the human capital profile that is associated with higher survival odds of a multinational subsidiary. So what we do, and this is helpful we believe that is helpful for managers in multinational subsidiaries, but also for policymakers. So we say, okay, so if you want, so for managers, so if they want to stay for a longer time in Portugal, we give more or less a picture of what kind of employees and what kind of characteristics and what kind of payment structures you want to implement in order to have a higher probability of survival. For policymakers, we could say, so I'm normally a little bit shy to give policy advice because, well, this is just a study focused on a specific topic and it's difficult to make big generalizations. But I would say that, okay, so when you evaluate so subsidies for multinationals to open new subsidiaries, normally the idea that we have is that there are not a lot of criteria to give those subsidies, or the criteria is just having a certain amount of jobs created, right? And this would, so I would not suggest a change in completely changing this criteria, but this would give another tool for policymakers to evaluate. So this would give us an idea, are these multinationals taking seriously this investment or not? And these are, I would say, the takeaways from the first study. So the second study, we look at so we look at the consequences, as I said before. So we have, again, these pictures. Surprisingly, I don't believe that you'll be surprised. These pictures are not from real people, so these are actors, surprisingly. But so what we want to show here with this representation is, so is this happening? And this is what we try to have here is someone that works for a multinational that has a specific profile that normally is associated with this kind of profile. Does these people that work in the multinational make the transfer for small and young domestic firms? So is this happening, and in which conditions is this happening? And we look specifically at the closure of multinationals again, right? So what we are looking at is, are these closure of multinational subsidiaries an opportunity for these small local firms to hire different kind of human capital? And we say that this human capital is different. Again, as we said before, these individuals, they will develop specific skills that might be, for example, in terms of internationalization, and they probably are very helpful for younger firms. Not all employees, of course, but some of them will fit in a young firm. And normally they are unavailable for these companies to hire them. Because normally they make a move, so people have a tendency to move to similar jobs, companies with similar cultures, and so it's very difficult for a small firm to hire these individuals. And this is our starting point. So, and our specific research question is, how does the closure of multinational subsidiaries influence the probability of a multinational employee joining a young domestic firm? More specifically, so what we are looking here is at, so we, just adding something, if I get this correctly, yes. So we look at, our logic is this balance between supply and demand of the labor market. So what we claim is that there is this lack of flows between employees from multinationals to small domestic firms. And what we say is that this shock of the closure will change the supply and demand dynamics. And we look, so we answer to 4 hypotheses. So the first one is a general one, so is the likelihood of a multinational professional moving to a young firm if it increases with displacement event. And we find this. So, and this is logic. So it creates more opportunities. So there will be more individuals like this available in the market looking for a job. Some of them will go to other multinationals, others will broaden their choices, and they will choose for a small firm. And then we look at boundary conditions for this first hypothesis. The first 2 are really related with the first one is related with the type of employees. So what we claim is that employees that were working for the multinational but had the entrepreneurial experience before, they will have a higher probability to go to this, to join another young firm in the end. And the other two are related with supply and demand dynamics. So the third one is related with, so if the displacement event is larger, then there will be more people in the labor market, and that will force some people to go to force or will broaden the choices for those employees. The fourth is the other way around. So what we say is that when in labor markets where there are more multinationals, then this will decrease the choices. And this is in line with our expectation that the natural choice for a multinational employee for their careers is to go to another multinational company. So, and we find support for these four hypotheses. And again, so this leads us to reach some conclusions regarding the labor markets. And our takeaways, well, again with a disclaimer, so we think that this might inform this the manager of young firms about this opportunity and looking at, again, not looking at displacement and closure of multinationals as something positive in general. So that's not what we are claiming here, but this might be an opportunity for specific firms and for specific parts of the economy, because it creates the opportunity for domestic firms to have access to human capital that they will never have access if this displacement event would not occur. For policymakers, I would say again that they should, so what this stresses is that they can work together with the people that lose their jobs, so with displacement employees, and with small firms to try to identify these events and try to identify these employees that might have now, that will change their careers. So our final, our third project is linked so it's linked with the previous project, but takes the opposite approach. So we look at former entrepreneurs that join multinational subsidiaries and what's the effect that they have in the performance of these subsidiaries. And as a motivation, so we have a quote, and to be fair, so sometimes we in academia, and I think this will not surprise everyone, so we are a little bit shy to go to talk with real managers. So there is this tendency of have these two worlds that don't have a lot of contact, and we'll make a lot of assumptions, and that sometimes might be a little bit over the top. That's why I think it's really important to see if what we theorize about has a clear link with what's happening. And that's what we did in this case. So we, also because we got some feedback on this project saying, yeah, are these entrepreneurs really being hired by these multinationals? So the multinationals don't give any value to this entrepreneurial because they will not fit the structure of a multinational. So we went to the field and we interviewed some people from human resource management in subsidiaries in Portugal from foreign companies, and surprisingly or not, well, they confirm our idea. So they actively look for this, I would not say entrepreneurs, but these entrepreneurial characteristics. So that's something that they actively look at. And this is a case, so they had broad examples, but in this case, so they gave us an example in one of these companies that they really hired an entrepreneur, someone that had a small company that was created by himself, and it really changed the way they made business in one of their sub-branches. So they really had an example that this happens. And this serves as motivation for our study where we try to look at how these multinational subsidiaries, so there is a lot of discussion that they also need to be entrepreneurial, that it's not just doing business as usual, trying to transfer the business from headquarters to a country. They also need to adapt to the local market, and they need to have their own entrepreneurial activities. So the entrepreneurship. And so we try to understand that, and we looked at the role of these former entrepreneurs in trying to do this. And we try to specifically to look at if they have an effect, if there is a real effect of hiring these people on performance. So our question is, can multinational subsidiaries improve their performance by hiring host country entrepreneurs as managers? Again, we looked at the main relationship, so really looking at, so are companies that hire more managers with entrepreneurial experience perform better? So that's our first hypothesis, and then we have boundary conditions for this. So, and we look at 3 dimensions. So again, the expats. So we claim that companies that have more expats will be able to incorporate better this entrepreneurial activity because these expats will do more or less the job of connecting the subsidiary with the headquarters and will give more space for these entrepreneurs to develop these activities and improve performance. So there will be complementarity with these 2 kinds of employees. Then we also look at knowledge density. So we claim that in more knowledge-intensive companies, these entrepreneurs will have a larger role because these entrepreneurial activities are more related with activities that are more creative. And then lastly, we look at the environmental dynamism. So if the industry is changing, that means that companies need to adapt, and these entrepreneurs will be the actors that will help firms to react to this dynamism. We find support for almost all hypotheses. We just didn't find support for the knowledge intensity. We are still struggling to understand why is that. But yeah, so those were the results, and we are still thinking about what's the reason for not finding this significant result. So what are the takeaways from here? So, so we look at this role of entrepreneurial capital on the work of foreign multinationals, and we look at internal and subsidiary internal and external factors that influence the effect of this entrepreneurial human capital on performance. And what are the takeaways? So, especially for managers that are making hiring decisions. So we give support to the idea that hiring these entrepreneurs is a good hiring strategy. And we also look at these conditions, so where are they more relevant? And in particular, I think we stress the importance of having also these expats. So these people that are trying to, that do this job of linking with the headquarters. So going back to the first slide, so these are the questions that we have. And so our objective, and coming back to our first slide where we had Qimonda, so this is the name of the company that was created by employees of Qimonda. So they created a new company. And we hope that, and they were doing this also because they were not absorbed by the labor market, we can say that. We can also say that they made use of the capital that was already there and they developed their activities. But what we want to say is that sometimes closures are very negative in general, especially for individuals. There are opportunities, so this is an opportunity that was created, and there is a labor market that might work in a different way and that can absorb these employees that were displaced by multinationals. And I hope that we have enough ideas to debate now. These are my initial words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. de Faria, for that explanation on the study you coordinated. To help us analyze and reflect upon the subject of this study, we have 3 distinguished speakers on the stage today. I'll start with Dr. Wolfgang Sofka, whose name you saw already on one of the slides as one of the co-authors. He's a professor in strategic and international management at the Department of Strategy and Innovation at Copenhagen Business School, and his research focuses on topics in international and innovation strategy, on how firms search for innovative ideas and commercialize them successfully. This includes looking at the strategic choices of multinational companies. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you also for the foundation for organizing this beautiful event, but also giving us the opportunity to do this research I'm just checking because when you are German, you have a tendency to speak very loudly, but since nobody was flinching in the audience, I think I'm still okay. Pedro did an excellent job in walking you through the project, how we planned it, how the stages went through it. I would just like to take 3-4 minutes to talk about things that we learned during the project, even if they were not completely planned. And the first thing that I would like to highlight is when we talk about multinationals, it's oftentimes about money, investment, patents that arrive in a country, and it seems like they can always be taken away or moved to another place. Now, what we have learned is there's one thing that stays here, and these are the employees. And while this multinational gave them a very particular organizational context to learn something, maybe to get in touch with a different kind of organization, with a different kind of technology, this is something that will be valuable even when this multinational leaves. And that should be a very good message for all of us, because it means that we, as the people who care about our neighborhood, our region, our family who maybe works for a multinational, will be quite resilient, even if this original event of the closure is a very disturbing one, or one that will sort of arouse our negative emotions. And the second part that I think is important here, even while these experiences, this human capital in a foreign multinational is very different from the average Portuguese firm, what we learn is it's valued by other Portuguese firms. So this sort of standard labor market notion of once an accountant, always an accountant, and you should never make a change, that is not true based on what we are finding. It is exactly this sort of different opportunities that a multinational provides. And then the second aspect that I would like to highlight follows from the first one, and this is the idea that you may have learned whatever you liked in any job. I will only pay you if I can trust that you have it. And now think for a second, if I would apply for a job with you, everybody would tell you that they have international experience, that they can beautifully manage a team, and that they are used to all high-tech environments. How could you trust what I'm saying? And here is where this multinational comes in as a context where I can signal to you that I have it, while the person that is just pretending to have it does not have it. And if you can see this as an employer, then you can pay me for it. And there's a second aspect that I think we take away from this project, that there is not just an abstract value in creating human capital, but there's one that can be reimbursed. And as a country, as a society, as individuals, we care about this, right? Because this is the money that pays our rent, our mortgage, and our cars. So while we started out, just to sum this up, while we started out with sort of thinking about a negative event, and undoubtedly is a negative event, we are not advocating the closure of all multinationals in Portugal. What we have learned is actually that once this emotional reaction is gone, what stays after the multinational leaves will be something that is very valuable to the host country, to Portugal in our sense. And in that sense, while we started out with a bit of a negative story, I think at the end we came out with a positive one. And that would be sort of my takeaway from the project.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sofka. Our next speaker is Dr. Aurora Teixeira, who is an associate professor at the economics faculty of our very own Universidade de Porto. Dr. Teixeira's research and expertise on human capital, economic growth, and managing innovation.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for being here. I much appreciate the work, because I think in the literature there is very few works in this area that explore the role of human capital, both as a factor of attracting FDI, but most in particular, in your case, to what extent it's connected with survival or with endurance of these type of projects. I will focus on the things that I missed in this study, because as you are giving us a broad picture about all of these multinational or subsidiaries of multinationals, we know that there is good FDI, bad FDI, and so there are a lot of heterogeneity within these investments, especially in Portugal. And if you take into account the last few years, we observe a huge difference between the 90s or the 80s FDI investments and the investments after the crisis. And when we took the overall picture, we do not get that, but we know that those, or the FDI from the 80s and 90s, mostly in the industry, it creates some roots, and it creates backwards and links with local firms, and so also contribute a lot to the human capital of regions. Whereas, for instance, the last FDI inflows, they were mostly mergers and acquisitions, and we only to explore really the opportunities that the wave of privatizations provide to these multinationals. So, although I found the studies quite informative, and it takes really to the point in this aspect, I think it will be interesting in the future work perhaps to divide several periods, trying to assess to what extent in different periods you get a different picture of those relations of human capital and FDI. As I said, I do believe that although these firms are a very few in terms of weight of firms in the total, they generally contribute to countries, not only Portugal, others, in terms of training, human capital. So there is a mutual causality. And when you talk about the imprinting conditions and to what extent the initial choices of these subsidiaries will influence their survival, I was wondering whether they have really choices, you know? So I can get the choices from the expat, but obviously subsidiaries as other firms, they have to be limited to the context. So you have a supply of human resources that is constrained. So it depends a lot on how the country, but mainly what are the resources available in the region. And I think the regional aspect of this type of empirical work is also a thing that I missed. So even if you control for regions, I think it's worthwhile to look at several distinct contexts, because both labor market and local labor markets matter, but also the institutional characteristics of this labor market. So it was not convincing to me that these initial conditions were choices. And also a thing that I was thinking, well, it was not surprising to me to the outcome. And I was wondering whether, if you compare subsidiaries with local national firms, whether you don't get the same result. And why subsidiaries can be a special species. So I would find interesting to, in terms of policy, to assess to what extent imprinting initial conditions on human capital would matter more to subsidiaries than to the national local firms, because it could be also eventually an interesting point to pursue. A second, or for the second work or the second project, one thing that puzzles me when there is an opportunity, regardless the social aspect that you underline and very well, but the figures that you present, not here, but in the text, is that only 7% of the employees of former subsidiaries that closed, so those that are employed, only 7% will enter in local national firms. So for me, this is really, I thought that it was really small. So what is really the benefit? Well, if you measure in that 7%, I would say that that is residual. So more than 90% of the unemployed or displacement workers, they enter in other multinationals. So obviously they will benefit the region nevertheless, because those subsidiaries are also within the region and the country. But in the opportunity for the local firms I'll miss. But also I think that obviously you are focused on human capital, but there are a lot of other benefits besides human capital related, or this mobility of workers that are beneficial for national or for local firms. So there is conditions that both the incumbent and those that were there, that they create for local firms, namely the technological content that they live. Even if they live, they already made some knowledge spillovers that are really valuable, and that we cannot, of course, with these databases type of work get. But I think there is much more benefits besides only this mobility. But I found the figure really small, and I was say, well, for me, if you take only that aspect, it was not really what matters. And in that sense, again, I would argue that, okay, if those 7% that enter in the national local firms, how you compare those local national firms that manage to hire these with others that do not have this type of employees? Are they outperforming those local national firms that do not manage to get these former subsidiaries and employees? That, regardless the figure, that for me is the key point. So, in spite of being a small, if I conclude that this small number, they will make the difference in terms of performance, I would be convinced that there was really an opportunity. Otherwise, the opportunity, I say, well, they enter in the firm, but what is the consequences for these national local firms? So thank you so much for your work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teixeira. Last but by no means least, and from the field directly of multinationals, to my left here is our third speaker, who is Dr. Carlos Ribas, who is the representative of Bosch in Portugal since 2015, and also heads Bosch Car Multimedia in Braga, not too far from here. Dr. Ribas spent a large part of his career in various countries around the globe. It's too long a list, I can't really say it right now. His current strategic priorities are innovation and development of high-tech products for Bosch in Braga.
Okay, so good afternoon to everybody. So thank you very much for the invitation. Basically, I have to start, so thank you to the preparation of the text. I almost agree with everything, basically. And but as I agree with almost the things that are already been said, maybe I'd like to change a bit the context of my speech. Is the fact, so the multinationals coming to Portugal or to another country, so basically they create, the first impact is extremely positive. They create a lot of jobs, so that means a very positive effect in terms of unemployment on the positive sense in the countries. The people normally, the multinationals, bring a lot of know-how, and they train the staff in a very positive way and very skilled way. But in the past, Portugal, by several reasons, mainly political, it was seen as just a manufactured country, just manpower on the lines producing the devices or the products. It took some time to understand that it was not really the best way to continue on that path. And as you mentioned already before, so some minutes ago, so the several multinationals has been closed in Portugal. I have the luck to always work in multinationals, what is a privilege from my point of view. that I learned a lot with that I had the opportunity to travel and work in several countries. And also it was a privilege from my point of view that I received to work with these multinationals. I had always had a chance also to never work in the multinational that was quoted in the stock markets. I worked in the multinational that were managed by two brothers. I'm working in Bosch is a foundation, not in stock market. So it's also a privilege that not have to make money to share at the end of the year with the stakeholders. Okay, but it's just coincidence of the life. In terms of the multinationals, I think that when they close is bad. Okay, the capital that they prepared, it's good, but they are not wide enough to be the most positive for the country. We have lack of things that should be prepared before, and they were not in the past. And even in Bosch, I just took some notes during the introduction. When the time we were Blaupunkt, 2004, 2007, we had a very vague, a very deep valley in our production. At the time, we were just mainly or basically production, a production plant. And later on, between 2010 and 2014, again, so we get a strong valley because in our industry, just to waste or lose one or two customers, and we have to cancel 500, 600 contracts. And this is really something that after several reflections and after to look what is happening in the other countries, we came out on the situation that on the crisis, if we look what are the countries less affected and the ones that are going out of the crisis much quicker, we look to Germany, we look to Japan, we look to US, so they are the most industrial countries, but they have one thing that is the main reason why they are not suffering that much in the crisis. They have the creation, they have the innovation. And since the time, so 2013, we started, okay, let's try, instead of speak about multinational that are closed or they'll close, let's try to avoid that similar situation will happen in the future. And we started a program with the University of Minho, it's our fantastic partner, innovation programs. And we'll start, we are starting now the first phase, and with these innovation programs, we developed several new products, some of them unique in the world, only produced in our plants. And if the customer wants our products, that kind of products, they have to buy in Bosch, and they have to buy in our plant. We are registered patents, several patents every year. What it was not the case in the past with the multinationals, because again, it was only manufacturing, nothing else. The people, it was very competent, the knowledge was very high, but in the process side, not in the creation side, not in the innovation. And the secret is the product that I'm placing today in the market, very successful, that they will not stay successful for the lifetime. So I have to be prepared to anticipate the market and be ready to put something different that will be also successful or not. We are not always successful. Important that we have more successful compared with the not successful stories. And as long as you can keep this path, even with the crisis, we will suffer less with the crisis. We will be more competitive. And since we start these programs, I have to say in 4 years, we already almost tripled the turnover. Today, Braga plant is a 1 billion euros turnover plant. Bosch in Portugal, all the locations are growing nicely. We represent around about 1% of the PIB in Portugal. And we foresee in the future, on the positive way, always investing more and more in innovation, development, research, with the partnerships, University of Minho, other centers of competence, and developing ideas and products that do not exist in the market today. For example, in Braga today, we are extremely focused in the autonomous driving. And we are absolutely convinced that the standard of the autonomous driving process that will be implemented in the worldwide, big portion of that is born today in Braga. So from my point of view, I'm not very concerned with a multinational that will close. I'm much more worried what we have to do to keep the multinationals growing in Portugal. That's my point.
Thank you, Dr. Ribas, and thank you for Bosch for the successful investment in Portugal as well, obviously. Like in the previous panel, would like to open the questions to the audience. Please feel free, any type of questions, and for any of the members of the panel, in English or in Portuguese, or in German, really, if you want. That's the question over there in the middle. I'm looking for microphones. They're coming. It's right behind. Aqui no meio, se faz favor. Obrigado.
Hi. I have a very small question. I find it interesting that when multinationals close, professionals go to these young firms, but I think it's also interesting to know when. How long does it take them to go to these young firms, or in any of, like, other multinationals or other kinds of jobs?
Thank you. We'll take another one or two questions if there is. Over here, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Inês Veiga, and my question is regarding the 7% value. I'm asking if you took into consideration the different possible wages offered by the national companies and other subsidiaries, as subsidiaries have an incentive to employ previous workers from other subsidiaries, and as they have an incentive, maybe they can offer a higher wage, and therefore the percentage of the workers who go to national companies will be slower, reduced.
One third question. Anybody? We'll do another round in a minute. Who wants to kick off?
Well, I can start by, well, I will try to group the questions more or less.
Sure.
So there were some points raised by the regional aspect, I think, is really relevant. We didn't go into it that much, so we didn't have, so we control for it, but we don't explore it. But I think you are right. So the options are not the same for. So both and this applies to the several studies, right? So the job options for people that lose their jobs are completely different in different regions and different industries. But also when you say, okay, a subsidiary arrives and then their choices to hire are also limited in some contexts. But again, what we say is that they make a first choice, and that's the location choice. So they will go to a specific location for specific reasons. It can be human capital, can be other kind of capital, right? And then what we say is that there is this first option, and then there is the second option, the second decision, and that's the kind of people that we will hire. So the job market will always offer some choices, and that's what we try to explore here. Another point that you raised, and it's quite interesting. So it's the imprinting aspect, right? So we are not claiming. So you are right. So imprinting is important for every company, and for every institution, right? The way you start in a lot of cases just defines the way we are, and we can also claim it as a country, right? So the way we started. So the way we start certain institutions will define our future, right? So what we claim is that, so yes, for domestics is also important imprinting. So that's so we don't question that. What and we don't really make a comparison, but what we claim is that this imprinting will be different, right? So we focus on the role of the expat, so role of experience in other multinationals, and this is a different kind of imprinting that I would expect in a domestic firm. But it would be so, and I will thank you for that. So that would be an interesting follow-up study, right? So try to compare the kind of imprinting that is more relevant for both kinds of firms. Regarding the number, so the domestic firms, so our claims are for small domestic firms, so the kind of people that go to these companies. Of course, the numbers are small, and the question from the audience is in line with that. So of course, so these are descriptive statistics. So so of course, multinationals will pay more, right? So it's not only, and they will give more conditions to these employees. So I'm used to working in a multinational in a specific context, I will look for a similar job. That will be my first preference, right? So and that's in line with the reason why you conducted the study. So this number is small from the beginning, and this displacement will increase that. So that's what our study tells us. So in the context where displacement occurs, these numbers will be higher. And so, because the natural choice, and these numbers are in line with that, the natural choice is that these employees will go to another multinational. That will be their natural choice. Your second question, and I totally agree, so we are making the assumption that hiring these people is positive. And I'm sure that I have someone here in the panel that will agree with me 100% that working for a multinational is positive. So, and you presented reasons, right? So not only, so if they pay more, probably they also invest more in training. And they will, so to be fair, so a multinational becomes a multinational because it was successful, right? So it was a domestic firm, grew, became a multinational. So these are companies that by default were successful at a certain moment. So they created routines of success. And they have more resources that can invest in human capital. And our assumption, and of course we did not test it, is that these employees will develop certain characteristics that will be beneficial for any firm that will hire them, not only for other multinationals. And what we claim is that these small firms, small domestic firms, have difficulties to attract human capital. And specifically this high-quality human capital that we are claiming. But we don't, so I understand your question is, so how do we know? So we make the step between, okay, increases the probability that they will join, and this is great.
Yeah, because sorry about that. They create routines within the former employees, yes, because the context is different. But when one of these 7% goes to a local national firm, yes, the context is different. Even they create routines, they may face clashes, so yes, conflicts. I don't know if that will increase productivity or decrease.
Yes, I totally agree that there might be that negative side.
Backlash.
Yes, that backlash, and we don't exclude that. Yeah. So we don't, and again, so we are not making strong claims about this positive effect. Again, it's an assumption.
Allow me just to interrupt.
Yes, yes.
Also, when we change between multinationals, it's even worse. The cultures are completely different, so the clash is much stronger. Very often.
You have to prove. I know that you have some perception, yes, because you know the reality, but with large numbers, you can have a different picture or not. I'm not saying that you are wrong. I'm saying that in order to make these statements, you need to have some basis, yes, or some evidence that both might compare those 93% that went to the other multinationals or not.
I could tell you 3 or 4 stories, very nice.
No, but you are right. So again, so it's an assumption, and I think we made it clear that it's an assumption, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But again, there is another thing. So these people are not forced to go to the small firms, right? So increase the probability, but they also make the choice, right? So it's not that. So there is also
a personal option.
Yes, there is also that part.
May I interrupt you there?
Yes.
Well, you yourself were saying that a lot of these closures, for example, 2 companies that you mentioned, I've covered myself a lot of them, have been high profile. You know, especially during the crisis, a company from country X closes and fires, yes, 300 people, people protesting, as we saw in the pictures. At a certain moment, I think, is there a possibility of this causing a certain amount of fear as well, or having caused some kind of impression, especially in a situation where, according to the study, if I'm reading it correctly, every year 10% or 205 of the multinational companies are closing in Portugal. So there's quite a high turnover. So it's not necessarily only benefits. There are also the 7% may be looking at risk factors as well, especially as they've come out of a multinational company. How important is that in Portugal at the moment?
Well, we don't. So again, that would imply that we'll make some assumptions, right? So again, so I will claim this again. So the closures, and I'm in line with what you said before. So I think and that's why when I say that we should be careful with policy implications, because again, I agree with you. So what we should do is try to avoid that they close down, right? So that should be the case, because that means that they will be successful. Said this, so our starting point is facing the situation where they decide to close down, and then we can discuss why, right? So it can be local conditions, it can be a strategic decision that is completely independent. So even when you say, you should create conditions that companies don't want to leave. In a lot of cases, you create those conditions, but there are changes in the market, right? So labor costs in another country decreased a lot, or there are opportunities, and then you...
This is one of the points that I'm not fully aligned with you.
In which part?
In the part of it is not the reason because the labor market is cheaper in another country, or some other reason that the strategic fit in the country with the customers. If you look on that way, then we should not have multinationals in Germany. It's the most expensive country in the world. So sorry, but I cannot agree with that. So we have to keep the multinationals in Portugal. I think it's not that difficult as long as you can prove if we do the development, if we have the process control, if we have the right people, the skilled people with the right knowledge, we have tremendous advantage in Portugal. Working time is longer, less holidays. Union is very flexible. Come on. I don't agree with that, sorry. It was one of the points that I don't agree. We are extremely competitive with, doesn't matter which country in the world. We have talents that you can, I don't like to say better than the other in the world, but at minimum equal. They are much more, less, less protested. They are much more resilient compared with other Central Europe countries. And I think we have tremendous assets, positive assets, to easily prove to the multinationals that Portugal is a nice country to be and to stay. I believe that other countries can do the same.
No, but I agree with you. That's not I'm not saying that. We totally agree on that point. What I'm saying is that these decisions, so they occur, right? And they are not. So why are they occurring?
But I think what Carlos is meant is that those decisions can be postponed or delayed forever when you get into the point that you make some investments that are like R&D, you make some partnerships with other organizations, be it polytechnicals, universities, or R&D institutions, that make your capital be more...
Yeah, but that's one of our points, right?
So it's different to...
I never understood, and as I said before, I lived abroad several years, in Japan, France, Belgium, US, and so I came from France 3 years ago, so I'm recent arriving to Portugal. And I born in Portugal, I grew up in Africa, so I'm a bit from
all over
the world. And what I found in Portugal, because I'm Portuguese just by coincidence, it's really something that in terms of advantage, competitive advantage, we have to valorate that. And we see today, for example, the most industrial countries in the world, like Germany, no unemployment. They are picking talent and competence for all the countries in Europe, even in Portugal. I have today more than 40 Bosch colleagues working in the Bosch in the world, in the Bosch companies in the world. And young talents, they're starting product management until leading plants. And this is something that today I think is different. In the past it was politics, then it was the strategic fit. Today is, from my point of view, competence, talent, and competitiveness. If we can prove that we are competitive in talent and in manufacturing, and it's the best fit from my point of view, and it's what I'm trying to do in Portugal with all the Bosch locations. You combine the both. What I'm hopefully, not me, but Bosch, we have been quite successfully, is today we have 3 plants in Portugal, and we have the R&D in all the 3 plants. And we have innovation programs with the university in all the 3 plants. And this is really what it brings competitiveness. We have universities permanently in our plants, people from the university permanently in our plants, and it's a kind of manpower without any vicious addictions, let's say, addictions, that they not bring something that everybody already knows. They bring things totally out of the box, brilliant, and this is what I believe in the last years. Portugal is a fashion country. We don't have skilled people unemployed. I'm facing several difficulties to find engineers. My engineers have been going to UK, to Germany, to several other countries, because all the skilled people that we have here, we don't have bad people. And sometimes my colleagues say, so the good engineers and the bad engineers. I say, no, we only have good engineers. We have a lack of engineers is so high in this moment, it cannot be bad. We have good engineers or we don't have, is the point today. And this is a big difficulty in this moment that we are facing. We want to grow, and we are facing difficulties, and we start thinking to do what do Germany and the other industrial countries, go to abroad countries to bring people, the skilled people.
Can we have the opinion of Dr. Wolfgang, as we are talking a lot about Germany?
Of course.
Yes.
Yes, now I will solve it.
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Say, please tell us how Germans
Tell us
are
what to
great.
do.
I'm curious.
I cannot speak for Bosch, but of course it's a quintessential German high-tech firm, right? In all the good and the bad ways. I think you can probably talk to that. I'm a bit surprised. I would guess if we're sitting in the same panel that is in the region of Thuringia or Baden-Württemberg, I would be a bit worried that they would say the same thing. So we have these excellent universities in Aachen and Karlsruhe. We work with them very intensively. We're working, of course, on the cool project like the autonomous cars. Is there, and I'm dodging your question, I'm saying it upstairs, but I would like to hear your opinion, Carlos. How is this competition within Bosch, within these subsidiaries? I understand that you are pushing Braga, which would be great if it would be, but I would like to hear what are the people saying who are in Silicon Valley. You know, they could make a strong case and they will have disadvantages. What are the people saying who are close to headquarters and know everybody? What are the people saying in Japan or in Detroit who are close to the customer and know what they want? How does this work within the multinational? Because this is maybe something that we in Portugal cannot influence. So we can set a framework, but then it's probably up to you, up to a certain degree, to be entrepreneurial, to bring the things together. Maybe you can talk a bit about that. Because otherwise, if you would leave it to the Germans, everything would be perfect in Germany. Right? So it's a challenge to you, I guess.
Excluding the weather.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you very much. You just repeat what I said before. So the formula is known. So the industries, innovation work together in universities as Karlsruhe, as Aachen. So exactly what I mentioned before. We are fully aligned. So that is the formula. You have just to look to the success stories and try copy or follow at least some milestones. In Bosch, we are a very particular company. What is really a pleasure for me to work in Bosch. We have our target growth year. Our target is to grow 8% per year, 5% internally and 3% by acquisitions. The 5% that we can grow internally, it's enough to all the locations. And we don't want to take the job that exists in the Bosch Germany or in Bosch Japan or in the Bosch Silicon Valley. We don't want that. We want to have our own place. We want to have our own ideas, unique, and some of them we have already, very successful, that does not exist in the other locations. So we don't want to take the job from the other locations to Portugal. We want to have our ideas and create our own work to our people. But the formula is a mention. So in innovation, R&D, together with the Center of Competencies, that's it. And then the projects, the process will come, and we have to build them. And having the innovation and the development close to the plants. I say in 2015, for example, and I'm not only speaking about the Braga plant. I'm speaking about the 3 plants that we have in Portugal. I'm the plant manager in Braga, but I'm the Bosch representative in Portugal. And all the locations hopefully are going nicely. But the fact is not the case to go and move production from one location to the other location. No, we want to have our products, our knowledge. Just one example, for example, let's say watches we have in Switzerland. And some watches we have only in Switzerland. And some niches of technology and competence, okay, great, we can have it, no problem. And if they are very successful in the market, even better.
But there are no human capital flows between the subsidiaries.
Yes, Bosch is a foundation, no profitable foundation. Yes. So the target is grow in permanence 8% per year, some years more, some years less, it's life. And the Bosch invests 9% of the turnover in R&D. So last year the turnover was 78 billion euros. So you can imagine how much it represents. We invest more in innovation, R&D, than we have in EBIT. So this is not all the companies are willing to do that. And if this is the case, so before back to Portugal 3 years ago, I was leading a Bosch plant in France. And we have this culture to move from different locations on a regular basis. So the culture, the standards, the values of Bosch are spread worldwide in the same way. And this is something that I really appreciate in Bosch. And I think is one of the biggest strengths that we have in Bosch.
Okay, but is France stealing your engineers? That's my question.
Sorry?
So when you say we don't have enough engineers, we are not growing enough in Braga because we don't have enough engineers, are these engineers also being picked up by the other subsidiaries abroad?
No, but this is not a problem. So I'm investing to happen. So I have no problem to send people from Bosch Portugal to other Bosch in the world. I have no problem at all. And I know that these people, they will go to acquire more competencies, and sooner or later they will be back to Portugal with these competencies. And the network, that is also very important in the company with 400,000 associates. And this is, I'm always motivating to my associates to go abroad, as long as it's in Bosch, in the Bosch internet. My problem is more concerned with today we have several multinationals from different countries in the world that they are coming to Portugal because today we are not, in terms of salaries, even the difference, on the no-skilled people, the difference is huge. On the high-skilled people, the difference is not that big anymore when compared to some years ago. And I'm quite happy. And I'm forced even to do some extraordinary salary revisions out of the time to, I'm normally we listen to Portugal is the only low-cost Eastern country in Europe. I'm not happy at all with this comment. And as soon as possible, I'd like to step out of this position. And so I have no problems that the salaries of the people in Portugal to rise, as long as we have the competence and the unique competence to keep putting in the market what the market wants, to pay what we want, that is good, that give a good life and good salaries to our people. And this is what we'd like to have. And this is our target. Not easy, but step by step.
I think that's a good point to end on. We've reached the end of the time for this session. I'd like to thank, first of all, the audience for being here and being interested in this subject. I'd like to thank the members of the panel for an interesting debate, and of course to the Fundação Francisco Manuel dos Santos for inviting us to this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.